The morning sun spilled over the rooftops of Manila, casting golden streaks across the streets. Inside a grand wedding hall, Isabella adjusted the delicate lace on her gown, her fingers trembling slightly. Everything around her glittered with perfection. The flowers, the polished marble floors, the soft hum of a piano. Guests murmured in admiration, their faces blurred behind smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Yet, beneath her own smile, a quiet unease had begun to settle. She had imagined this day 1,000 times, rehearsed the laughter, the glances, the vows. But reality was heavier, stranger. Raphael, her husband, stood at the altar, sharp in his tailored suit, his grin dazzling. He seemed untouched by worry, entirely at ease. Watching him, Isabella felt the familiar tug of love, but also a shadow she couldn't name. The ceremony moved forward with its practiced grace. Isabella's mother clasped her hand briefly, whispering, "You look radiant, Hija. Today is everything you dreamed." She nodded, lips tight, heart beating too fast. Her gaze flicked to Raphael again, noticing the way his eyes scanned the crowd, lingering a fraction too long on faces she couldn't place. He whispered something to the priest, a soft laugh escaping him, and she tried to let it go, focusing instead on the warmth of the chapel and the scent of roses that filled the air. Guests took their seats, the music swelling, the promise of joy threading through every note. Isabella caught sight of her father, proud yet distant, adjusting his tie as if to shield himself from the sentiment. She smiled at him, forcing the tension from her shoulders. This was meant to be perfect. Every detail she had labored over, the ivory invitations, the hand-painted table settings, the towering floral arch, now gleamed under the morning light. Yet beneath the surface, a knot twisted in her stomach. Something peered that perfection was fragile, that it might shatter in ways she could not yet imagine. When Raphael took her hand, Isabella felt the familiar jolt of hope and fear intertwined. "You're beautiful," he said softly, his voice low but certain. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they stirred the small, gnawing doubt she had been pushing aside for months. The chapel seemed too quiet now, the guests too still, the air thick with expectation. She could almost hear the faint echo of a warning, a tremor of anticipation for what the coming days might bring. As they exchanged vows, Isabella's mind wandered through every moment that had led here. The whispered promises, the late-night phone calls, the small secrets tucked away in shadows of their conversations. She smiled, nodded, repeated the words she had rehearsed, but a tiny part of her felt as if she were performing in someone else's life. Raphael squeezed her hand, eyes gleaming, and for a moment, the unease softened. The chapel seemed to breathe with her, and she allowed herself a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning she had dreamed of. The ceremony ended with applause, camera flashes capturing smiles and tears, and Isabella felt herself swept along in the tide of celebration. Yet as she walked down the aisle, clutching Raphael's hand, she noticed a flicker, a hesitation in his step, a glance that lingered too long on the back of a stranger's head. She didn't understand it yet, but the seed of doubt had been planted. 9 days remained before everything changed. The first days after the wedding carried a fragile sweetness, as if the world itself was willing to bend around Isabella's joy. She and Raphael moved into their apartment, a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manila's bustling streets. Sunlight spilled over the sleek furniture, but even in the brightness, shadows clung to the corners, creeping along the edges of her thoughts. She tried to ignore them, tried to immerse herself in honeymoon bliss, but subtle oddities began to surface. Raphael's phone never left his hand, his laughter sometimes a beat too hollow, and the way he ducked behind closed doors left her stomach tight with unease. Isabella had always trusted easily, believing in love's purity and strength, but now, Tiny inconsistencies began to gnaw at her mind. A missed call, an unfamiliar name lighting up Raphael's screen, a door shut just a fraction too quickly. She confronted herself. Was she imagining it? Or did the happiness she had fought so hard for mask something darker? She began keeping quiet notes in her phone, small observations that seemed harmless at first. A text deleted, a late-night absence, but together they formed an invisible pattern she could not ignore. The first confrontation came quietly, almost imperceptibly during breakfast. Raphael hummed while buttering toast, the morning sun painting his face in golden streaks. Isabella cleared her throat. "Did you call Lara yesterday?" she asked, trying to sound casual, as if asking about a coworker's errand. His fork froze midair. A twitch passed over his jaw before he smiled. "Lara? Just a colleague," he said smoothly, voice measured. "Why?" "Nothing," she murmured, trying to mask the chill running through her. But the seed had been planted, and now every glance, every whisper, every sudden phone lock was magnified. She began to notice how Raphael's charm shifted subtly when certain topics arose, how his reassurances felt rehearsed, and how a flicker of defensiveness shadowed his eyes. The apartment, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a stage where she was both audience and actor, unsure whether she was witnessing love or deception. Late at night, Isabella lay awake, the city's hum below a constant reminder of the world moving on, oblivious to the silent battles waged in small apartments. She replayed every laugh, every tender word, and every subtle glance, searching for cracks. A single smile from Raphael could send her heart soaring, only for a vague unease to return moments later. She sensed a duplicity she could not yet name, a betrayal waiting quietly in the wings. Her anxiety became almost ritualistic. She checked messages, traced calls, and lingered by the window when Raphael was out, watching the streets below, imagining where he might be, with whom, and for how long. Each small revelation, each hesitation she noticed, made her feel simultaneously terrified and alive, as if she were balancing on the edge of something irreversibly dark. It was during one of these restless evenings that she found a detail she could no longer ignore, a glimpse of a name on Raphael's laptop, a photo peeking from a folder marked "Private." Her pulse raced. The feeling she had been brushing aside, the whispering shadow at the edges of her happiness, now had a face she could not ignore. She knew, in that instant, that her life had already begun to fracture, that the image of perfection she had clung to for 9 days was only a fragile illusion. The following morning, she confronted herself with the truth she had long resisted. The cracks were real, and they were spreading. She could feel them beneath her skin, threading through every smile and every tender touch. It was no longer a question of trust. It was a question of survival, of facing the reality of who Raphael truly was. And in that moment, Isabella realized that she could not go forward as if nothing had changed. Something had to give, and the weight of discovery pressed heavy on her chest, guiding her toward the confrontation she could no longer avoid. The morning air felt heavy, almost oppressive, as Isabella sat at the edge of their bed. Raphael had already left for work, his briefcase swinging from his hand, a smile plastered as though nothing was amiss. She stared at his laptop on the desk, its sleek black surface suddenly ominous. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitant yet compelled. The subtle unease that had shadowed the past 9 days now demanded resolution. She needed to know. Opening the laptop, her eyes immediately caught a folder she had never noticed before. Private. Her pulse quickened. She clicked. Images spilled across the screen, Raphael in restaurants, cafes, and parks, always with the same woman. Sophia, laughing, touching his arm, smiles intimate and unrestrained. Isabella felt her stomach lurch. Her mind recoiled at the clarity of proof. This was no fleeting mistake, no misunderstanding. Every photo screamed betrayal. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the laptop. A knot twisted in her chest as she scrolled, each image a dagger twisting deeper. There were messages, too, flirtatious and coy, timestamps hidden in the early hours when Raphael was supposed to be asleep beside her. The weight of deceit pressed down, heavy and suffocating. She remembered his laughter, his tender promises during the wedding, the way he had held her close at night. All of it now felt like an elaborate performance, a stage set for her own heartbreak. Isabella's vision blurred as anger, disbelief, and sorrow collided inside her. She rose and paced, the room suddenly too small, walls closing in. The soft morning light streaming through the window now seemed harsh, spotlighting the raw wound of her reality. Her reflection in the mirror caught her attention, eyes wide, cheeks pale, lips trembling. The woman staring back at her was not the radiant bride of 9 days ago. She was someone awakened, someone forced into a confrontation with betrayal she could not unsee. Her mind raced. Could she confront him directly, demand explanations, risk the calm facade collapsing into chaos? Or should she wait, watch, gather more evidence? The thought of Sophia, the other woman who had laughed and flirted, invaded her private space, bringing with it an icy, sharp-edged fury. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, trying to anchor herself. A sudden knock at the door made her jump. It was Raphael's mother, cheerful, oblivious. "Breakfast is ready, Hiya," she called. Isabella forced a smile, nodding without speaking, her throat tight with unspoken tension. She returned to the laptop, scrolling one last time, imprinting every detail onto her memory. She could no longer pretend. The perfect beginning had dissolved into fragments, scattered and jagged. The facade was broken, and the truth lay bare. By mid-morning, she found herself walking through the apartment, tracing Raphael's movements, imagining the countless moments he had spent lying, manipulating, performing fidelity, while the shadow of Sophia's presence lingered. Every laugh, every casual glance he had shared with her before now seemed tainted. It was no longer doubt. It was fact. Betrayal had a face, and it had a name. Isabella sank onto the sofa, heart hammering, mind spinning. She needed time to breathe, to think, to plan her next move. The enormity of the discovery weighed on her, a forceful tidal wave threatening to drag her under. But beneath the fear, a quiet, dangerous clarity began to form. She could feel it, like the first spark of a storm that could not be contained. The path ahead was uncertain, terrifying, yet irresistibly compelling. She knew the days to come, beside, would demand choices she had never imagined facing. And in that moment, as the city continued its indifferent hum below, Isabella understood one undeniable truth. There was no going back. The cracks in Raphael's life had revealed themselves fully, and she was standing at the edge of something irreversible, a precipice that would force her to confront not only him, but the darker recesses of her own heart. The discovery had shattered the fragile calm Isabella had clung to. The apartment, once a sanctuary of newlywed bliss, now felt like a cage closing in around her, suffocating and unyielding. She wandered from room to room, tracing the spaces where Raphael had moved, imagining the laughter, the whispered messages, the stolen moments with Sophia. Each memory, once warm, now carried the sting of betrayal, twisting her thoughts into spirals she could not escape. Her mind felt like a storm, relentless and chaotic, and sleep was a distant memory. She replayed every interaction from the past 9 days, questioning herself with a ferocity she had never known. Had she been blind, naive, too trusting? The smallest gestures now seemed laden with hidden meaning. A brush of a hand, a look held a second too long, a smile at an offhand remark. They were no longer innocent. They were fragments of deception. Isabella's pulse quickened as she realized how thoroughly the illusion had been maintained, how easily Raphael had manipulated appearances, keeping her both close and apart, tethered to him even as he strayed. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint hum of the city below, and feel the relentless churn of her own mind. Thoughts collided violently, rage against Raphael, sorrow for herself, fear of the unknown, and a strange, sharp clarity about the betrayal. The emotional weight pressed on her chest, making every breath deliberate, every heartbeat a reminder of the fracture that now defined her world. Sure. He began speaking aloud in moments of solitude, words bouncing off the empty walls of the apartment. "How could you?" she whispered into the darkness, voice breaking, though Raphael was miles away. "How could you do this to me?" The sound of her own voice, raw and urgent, became a strange solace, a way to anchor herself against the flood of emotions threatening to sweep her under. She questioned her own judgment, doubted her instincts, and simultaneously knew with unshakable certainty that Raphael's betrayal was absolute. Memories of her childhood, of trusting and being let down, resurfaced with unusual clarity, threading into her current pain. She realized how patterns of manipulation had subtly shaped her understanding of relationships, making her both vulnerable and astute. Every tear shed, every small betrayal endured in silence, now coalesced into a heightened awareness, sharpening her mind even as it threatened to unravel her heart. By the fourth night, Isabella found herself standing by the window, gazing at the city lights that seemed to mock her with their calm indifference. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her, pale and haunted, eyes wide with sleepless intensity. She could almost see the fissures spreading across the world she had believed to be solid, tangible, trustworthy. Every detail of Raphael's betrayal replayed relentlessly, like a film stuck on a single devastating frame. It was in this torment that a dangerous clarity emerged. She realized she could no longer remain passive, could no longer let the deceit linger unchallenged. Thoughts of confrontation, of uncovering every hidden truth, of seeking answers no one else could provide, began to form a strategy in her mind. The storm within her, chaotic and unrelenting, had begun to crystallize into intent. As dawn broke, spilling gray light across the apartment, Isabella sat at her desk, trembling hands poised over Raphael's messages, photographs, and the evidence she had collected. The realization was chilling and invigorating in equal measure. She was at the edge of a choice that would define her, a precipice that could not be stepped back from. The mind that had been torn apart in turmoil was now preparing for action, ready to move beyond fear into the dangerous clarity of purpose. Isabella's days blurred into a tense rhythm of observation and quiet investigation. Every call, every text, every small trace of Raphael's life became a thread to follow, and she pursued them with a vigilance that left her exhausted but strangely alive. Maria, her closest friend, had noticed her restlessness and concern, though Isabella revealed nothing of the full scope. Yet even in secrecy, she felt the comfort of another presence, someone to silently witness her transformation from naive bride to a woman sharpening herself against betrayal. Late one evening, Isabella found herself poring over old receipts, scattered bills, and tiny digital breadcrumbs left by Raphael's careless or calculated moments. Restaurants he frequented, gifts that didn't match their shared memories, late-night withdrawals, all hinted at a life hidden beneath the surface of their shared apartment. It was meticulous work, and every new detail uncovered a layer of deception she hadn't imagined. The man she thought she knew had carefully maintained an entire parallel existence. Her mind turned to Sophia, the other woman. How long had this gone on? How many moments of intimacy had Raphael stolen from her awareness? Every image, every whispered word she reconstructed in her mind fed the tightening coil of anger that had begun to take residence in her chest. It was a mixture of disbelief and grim fascination, the way she now understood the duality of the man she had married. He was capable of tenderness, of laughter, yet beneath it, there had always been calculation. Isabella decided to seek insight beyond her own observations. She reached out to Maria, inviting her to the apartment under the guise of tea and conversation. As they sat, Isabella's fingers tracing the rim of her cup, she began to probe subtly, weaving questions into casual discussion. Maria listened, careful not to betray suspicion, but her responses helped Isabella map the social circles Raphael had moved through, the colleagues who knew and those who did not. It was like peeling layers of an onion, each revelation stinging but necessary. The quiet hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the turbulence inside Isabella's mind. Every new connection she unearthed made the betrayal feel more concrete, more suffocating. She found references to past lovers, fleeting affairs, and financial maneuvers that hinted at manipulation of not only emotions but also power and control. Raphael's life had been a carefully curated performance, one that Isabella had stepped into without realizing the full cost. By the third night of her investigation, Isabella began documenting everything, creating timelines, noting inconsistencies, piecing together an almost cinematic portrait of deception. Every detail sharpened her understanding, every hidden secret a piece of a puzzle she had never agreed to play. The work was exhausting, yet it made her feel dangerous in a way she had never known, aware, in control, poised at the edge of discovery. A knock on the door startled her. Maria had come to leave, her expression cautious but concerned. Isabella smiled faintly, masking the storm inside her. "I think I understand now," she said softly, her voice steady but carrying the edge of something unspoken. Maria only nodded, the silence between them heavy with recognition of the weight Isabella now carried alone. As Maria left, Isabella returned to the scattered papers and files, the quiet apartment now feeling like both sanctuary and battlefield. Each revelation fueled a growing debt. Rumination. She would confront Raphael, she would uncover the full truth, and she would not allow the intricate web of lies to remain intact. In that quiet determination, the first threads of a dangerous plan began to form. By dawn, she paused, hands hovering over a stack of photographs, her mind teetering on the edge of fury and calculation. The pieces were falling into place, and she felt a chilling exhilaration, one that promised that the confrontation she had delayed would soon become inevitable. The evening settled over the apartment, draping the rooms in shadows that seemed heavier than the dim glow of the ceiling lights. Isabella had prepared herself for this moment, yet her hands trembled slightly as she waited for Raphael to return. The evidence, meticulously gathered over days, lay scattered across the dining table. Photographs, messages, receipts, everything that had once been hidden now exposed in their brutal clarity. She had rehearsed the confrontation in her mind countless times, yet she knew no rehearsal could capture the storm that would erupt in the space between them. When Raphael finally entered, his briefcase in hand, the casual ease he displayed was a mask she had grown all too familiar with. He smiled, a practiced curl of lips, and leaned against the doorframe. "You've been quiet today," he said, voice light, unaware of the tempest waiting for him. Isabella's pulse quickened. She held his gaze, letting the silence stretch, heavy and accusing. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with tension. "I've seen everything, Raphael," she said, voice low but steady, carrying the weight of days spent unraveling his secrets. Her hands rested on the table, hovering over the photographs. He blinked, the first crack appearing in his composure, though his lips remained curved in a faint, cautious smile. What are you talking about?" he asked, tone faltering as he stepped closer. Isabella placed a photo on the table, sliding it toward him. Raphael's eyes widened as he recognized Sophia's face. her laughter frozen in pixels and light. The faint color drained from his cheeks, replaced by a mixture of shock and the smallest flicker of fear. It's not what it looks like, he said quickly, the words tumbling out, desperate and unconvincing. It looks exactly like what it is, Isabella replied, her voice gaining strength, each word deliberate, precise. She leaned forward, anger coiling like a living thing around her ribs. You've lied to me for 9 days, for months before that, weaving a web of deceit. I trusted you, I loved you. And this... Her hand swept across the table, brushing the scattered evidence. This is your truth, Raphael. This is everything you thought you could hide. Raphael swallowed hard, taking a hesitant step back, the first real vulnerability she had seen in him. Isabella, please, it's not what you think. You're misunderstanding. But she didn't let him finish. The words she had rehearsed for nights now surged through her unfiltered. I'm not misunderstanding anything. You've been 2 people, one in front of me, one behind my back. And I... Her voice broke slightly, but the fury remained, unrelenting. I will not let this go. Not this time. Sophia's name hung in the air like a curse, a phantom presence that seemed to fill the apartment. Raphael's gaze flicked toward the door, though he knew the woman was not here yet. The thought of her ignited a visible tension in him, and Isabella watched, calculating, observing every shift in his posture, every quiver in his expression. The argument escalated, words colliding violently, accusations flying. Their apartment, once filled with laughter and sunlight, now seemed smaller, suffocating, every shadow a witness to the unraveling of their lives. Isabella's breathing grew rapid, a mixture of fear and exhilaration as she realized the confrontation had become more than revelation. It was a reckoning. Finally, Raphael slumped into a chair, defeated, the bravado gone, leaving only raw human vulnerability. Isabella's chest heaved, the weight of her own emotions mingling with the cold satisfaction of seeing the man she loved revealed in full, flawed reality. She had won the first battle of awareness, yet the war was far from over. As the night deepened, the apartment settled into a tense quiet. Raphael's silence was heavy, but Isabella knew this was only the beginning. The next steps would require careful planning, patience, and resolve. And somewhere in the shadows of that quiet apartment, the first threads of a dangerous plan began to weave themselves into the fabric of her mind, promising that the days to come would not be gentle or forgiving. The apartment was quiet now, the echoes of confrontation lingering like smoke that refused to dissipate. Isabella sat alone at the dining table, the scattered evidence from the previous night still in front of her. Raphael's defeat had left her with a strange, cold clarity, a sense of control she had never felt before. Her pulse thrummed not with fear, but with a dangerous energy that made her hands tremble with anticipation. She understood in that charged moment that she could no longer remain passive. Action was inevitable. She leaned back, closing her eyes, letting the chaos of the past days settle into a sharp focus. Every detail of Raphael's deception was now catalogued in her mind, a map of lies that led straight to him. She began thinking in terms of patterns, timing, opportunities, small windows that could be exploited, ways to confront him and Sophia simultaneously, to force the truth into the open in a way that no argument, no pleading could undo. Each thought was precise, deliberate, an outline forming in the dark corners of her mind. Isabella remembered the late nights spent watching the city from their balcony, beguiling every route Raphael could take, every clandestine meeting he might arrange. Now that vigilance became a tool. She visualized the apartment, the hallways, the streets outside, each element a piece of a plan that would leave no escape for deception. It was not enough to confront him verbally. She needed evidence, leverage, a way to make the betrayal undeniable and unavoidable. Maria had noticed the shift in her friend. The laughter and lightness that had occasionally broken through the storm of anxiety were gone. In their short conversations, Isabella's words carried a new precision, a cold logic interlaced with the emotional undercurrent of betrayal. She was planning, yes, but also testing her own limits, measuring how far she could go without breaking entirely. Every plan had an emotional cost, but the need for justice, her justice, was worth it. She began organizing the apartment like a strategist mapping a battlefield. Photographs arranged chronologically, notes scribbled with timelines, messages highlighted with details she had once overlooked. Every piece fit into a larger narrative that she could now wield, one that Raphael could not deny or dismiss. The adrenaline of planning became intoxicating. Her heart beat in tandem with the possibilities, her mind alive with anticipation and calculation. Sleep became sporadic, dreams filled with flashes of moments she had imagined. Raphael surprised, confronted, stripped of his charm and lies. Sophia's reaction exposed, every truth laid bare. The boundary between imagination and reality blurred, sharpening her focus rather than weakening her. In these nocturnal rehearsals, she practiced her words, her movements, the exact timing that would maximize impact. Each scenario built a foundation of inevitability. Each rehearsal strengthened the resolve that had grown from despair into determination. By the fifth night, Isabella felt a cold, thrilling clarity. She knew Raphael's routines, the weak points in his carefully maintained facade, and the precise ways to manipulate circumstance to reveal the betrayal fully. The apartment, once a battleground of emotions, now felt like a war room. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman who was no longer naive, no longer vulnerable. She was calculating, patient, poised, and terrifying in her resolve. And yet, beneath the clarity and control, a darker pulse ran through her, an instinct she could not deny. The confrontation would come, and when it did, it would leave no room for evasion. The plan was forming in her mind, precise and cold, ready to unfold like a storm that could not be stopped. The next encounter would be decisive, a collision of betrayal and consequence, and Isabella knew she would not retreat. The pieces were in place, the stage set, and the moment of truth would arrive before the week ended. The night was thick and heavy, Manila's streets glowing dimly beneath scattered streetlights, the hum of the city muted by anticipation. Isabella had chosen the location with care, a small, isolated villa on the outskirts, its silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Every detail had been planned, every exit and entrance accounted for, every possible reaction rehearsed. The tension in her chest was a living thing, coiling tight with each passing minute as she waited. When Raphael arrived, Isabella observed him from the shadows, his car rolling to a stop at the villa's entrance. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, casual and unsuspecting, unaware that the trap she had meticulously prepared was already set. The sight of him ignited a cold fire inside her. Every smile, every lie, every whispered secret he had hidden was distilled in that instant into a sharp clarity. She felt no hesitation now, only the hard, precise focus of someone who had crossed the line from pain into resolve. Sophia arrived shortly after, her presence announced by the high-heeled click of shoes on the stone driveway. Isabella's breath caught, but she did not falter. She had anticipated this, rehearsed it, prepared herself for every possible interaction. Sophia laughed lightly at Raphael, the intimacy between them evident in her gestures, in the way she brushed against him casually. The sight was almost unbearable, yet it steeled Isabella's resolve. Her hand tightened around the edge of the railing, fingernails digging into the wood, a physical anchor to the storm of emotions within. Isabella stepped forward, letting her voice carry across the quiet night. "Raphael, Sophia." It was calm, even, but the underlying edge of authority demanded attention. Both turned, startled by the sudden intrusion, faces reflecting shock that she had orchestrated their meeting so precisely. Raphael's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Sophia, still smiling faintly, attempted casual composure, but the tension in her posture betrayed her awareness of the danger she had not anticipated. The confrontation began slowly, words first, measured and precise. Isabella's voice was steady, each accusation delivered with deliberate calm. "You've spent 9 days deceiving me, lying, manipulating, while pretending to be someone you're not. And you thought I wouldn't see, Raphael. You thought I wouldn't know." Her eyes bore into his, every syllable a blade. Raphael opened his mouth to respond, but she cut him off, the rehearsed precision of her plan dictating the pace. Sophia attempted to interject, but Isabella's presence dominated the space. The villa, dark and silent aside from the occasional rustle of leaves, felt claustrophobic, every shadow and corner magnifying the tension. Words collided violently, accusations, denials, excuses, each one punctuated by a G undercurrent of fear and anticipation. Isabella's breathing was controlled, though her chest burned with the fury and betrayal she had carried for days. The argument escalated into physicality, though not yet of violence. Hands gestured sharply, bodies shifted defensively, and the air seemed charged with an almost tangible electricity. Isabella's gaze never wavered, noting each flinch, each falter in their composure. She saw Raphael's vulnerability, the carefully constructed charm stripped away in the face of confrontation. Sophia's mask of indifference began to crack, revealing the same fear and guilt Isabella had anticipated. The night stretched, time seemingly suspended as truth and consequence collided. Isabella spoke, stepped, gestured, every movement a calculated demonstration of power. She allowed them no escape from the reality she had orchestrated, forcing every lie, every betrayal, to be seen in stark clarity. The villa became a crucible, the three of them bound in an unavoidable confrontation where pretense could not survive. Finally, Raphael slumped against a wall, defeated, the bravado that had sustained him now gone, leaving only a hollow, human shell. Sophia's expression mirrored his, the glamour stripped away by exposure. Isabella's chest heaved, the emotional weight she had carried for days merging with the intoxicating precision of control. She had orchestrated the encounter flawlessly, revealing the truth in a way that left no room for denial, no avenue for escape. As the night deepened, a heavy, charged silence settled over the villa. The confrontation had ended, but its consequences had only begun. Isabella stepped back, surveying the scene, aware that the events of the coming hours would irrevocably shape the lives of all three. The storm she had unleashed had been precise, inevitable, and chilling in its clarity. She felt the first shiver of what was to come, a reckoning that would ripple outward, leaving no part of their world untouched. The villa was silent now, the chaos of confrontation replaced by a tense, suffocating stillness. Isabella stood near the edge of the living room, chest heaving, heart pounding, the adrenaline from the encounter still thrumming through her veins. Raphael and Sophia were slumped in separate corners, their expressions hollow, eyes wide with shock and fear. The weight of what had transpired pressed down on the space like a physical force, and Isabella realized that nothing could ever return to the normalcy of her previous life. She looked around at the scattered evidence, the small traces of betrayal laid bare, and felt a strange, dark satisfaction. The lies had been exposed, the deceit revealed. But it was not relief she felt. It was the cold clarity of control, the intoxicating knowledge that she had orchestrated the outcome. Her mind, still racing, began to catalog the consequences. Raphael's humiliation, Sophia's fear, the ripple of events that would spread outward from this night. Each thought tightened the coil of resolve she had carried through the past days, making her feel simultaneously invincible and fragile. Raphael attempted to speak, his voice trembling. Isabella, it wasn't supposed to go like this, he stammered, glancing at Sophia as if seeking an escape that did not exist. Isabella's gaze, sharp and unwavering, met his. It went exactly as it was supposed to, she said softly, each word measured, deliberate. Every secret, every lie, you've been caught in the web you wove. And now there's no hiding. Her tone was calm, almost chilling in its precision, the emotion beneath contained but undeniable. Sophia's lips quivered, her eyes darting nervously between Isabella and Raphael. You can't just... she began, but Isabella cut her off with a raised hand, a subtle gesture that silenced her. The weight of authority and purpose in that gesture left no room for argument. The villa, once a neutral space, had become a stan, where consequence and accountability were unavoidable. Isabella realized then that power could be wielded as elegantly as it could be destructively, and she felt the thrill of standing on the precipice of that knowledge. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the distant murmur of the city, oblivious to the emotional devastation unfolding in the villa. Isabella's thoughts flickered to the future, to the ripple effects of this night. Family, friends, neighbors, none would remain untouched by the revelations that had occurred here. She felt the tension between justice and vengeance, between morality and survival, pressing against her chest with relentless intensity. It was a delicate balance, and she understood that missteps could undo everything she had orchestrated. Hours passed in a slow, suffocating rhythm. Raphael remained subdued, the charm and bravado that had once defined him eroded by exposure. Sophia's composure fractured entirely, revealing fear, guilt, and panic in equal measure. Isabella observed them, cataloging every reaction, storing every tremor and hesitation as proof of the truth she had uncovered. She felt a perverse satisfaction in witnessing the human cost of deception laid bare, yet beneath it simmered an undercurrent of unease, an acknowledgement that the night's events would not leave her untouched. As dawn began to creep through the villa's windows, painting the walls with pale light, Isabella finally allowed herself to sit, exhausted but alert. The aftermath was complete, the confrontation executed, and the consequences beginning to take shape. Her mind raced through the implications, the law, the fallout, the whispers of neighbors and colleagues, the inevitable questions that would arise. Every possibility was a thread to follow, a path that would demand precision and courage. And in the quiet that followed, Isabella understood one undeniable truth. The violence she had, or orchestrated, the confrontation she had engineered, had changed everything. Nothing would be the same again. She could feel the first tremors of what was to come. The legal scrutiny, the social repercussions, the emotional fallout. The villa, silent and still, had become both a monument to her triumph and a reminder of the dangerous path she had chosen. The storm had passed, but its echoes would resonate far beyond these walls, shaping the lives of all involved in ways they could not yet comprehend. The morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the villa. Isabella sat at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee, though she barely noticed the taste. The night's events had left a residue of tension and adrenaline that lingered stubbornly, like smoke that refuses to dissipate. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the human chaos within the walls of the apartment, but inside, the consequences of her orchestration were beginning to unfurl with relentless clarity. Raphael remained silent in the corner, slumped and defeated. His eyes, once full of charm and calculated confidence, now revealed vulnerability and the raw awareness of exposure. Sophia, too, had shifted, the bravado she had attempted to maintain finally stripped away, leaving only fear and guilt. Isabella observed them both, cataloging every reaction, every hesitation, every flicker of emotion. She had forced their truths into the open, and now she watched the intricate threads of deception unravel before her eyes. Her mind raced through the revelations of the past days, piecing together patterns that Raphael had worked tirelessly to conceal. Financial discrepancies, secret meetings, hidden messages, they all formed a tapestry of duplicity that she now held entirely in her control. Each new fragment of truth intensified the gravity of her act, ions and the inevitability of the fallout. The weight of understanding settled over her like a cloak. Knowledge, power, and danger intertwined in a way that left no room for retreat. Raphael finally spoke, voice trembling, a mixture of regret and fear. "Isabella, I never meant for any of this to happen. His words faltered under the weight of her gaze. She did not respond immediately, allowing silence to stretch, a subtle tool of psychological leverage. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The man who had once commanded her trust now trembled beneath the scrutiny she wielded with precision. Sophia attempted to speak next, her tone shaky, defensive. "You don't understand. It wasn't—" Isabella raised her hand, a gesture that ended her protests before they began. "I understand perfectly," she said, voice steady, low, and controlled. "Every lie, every betrayal, everything you thought was hidden, it's all unraveling now, and there's nowhere left to run." Her words cut through the room like a knife, precise and measured, leaving no room for denial. The villa felt smaller, charged with the weight of truth. Every shadow, every corner seemed to bear witness to the collapse of carefully constructed lives. Isabella noted the subtle tremors in Raphael's hands, the avoidance in Sophia's eyes, and she felt an intoxicating mix of satisfaction and anticipation. The secrets she had uncovered were no longer abstract. They were living, breathing proof of deceit and manipulation, impossible to ignore or dismiss. By midday, she began to catalog everything systematically, organizing the evidence she had accumulated into coherent files and timelines. Each document, each photograph, each message was a thread in the tapestry she had patiently unraveled. The act of organization was both practical and cathartic. It allowed her mind to focus, to maintain control in a situation where emotions could easily spiral beyond containment. As the hours passed, Isabella realized the magnitude of what had occurred. The confrontation, the exposure, the psychological pressure she had applied. It had all been a precursor to a reckoning that would extend far beyond this villa. Raphael and Sophia were left with no illusions, no defenses. Their lives, meticulously constructed on deception, were now laid bare. The realization brought a cold, precise clarity. The unraveling of secrets was not an end, but the beginning of consequences they could neither predict nor contain. By evening, the villa was suffused with quiet, a tense calm settling over the three of them. Isabella knew that the coming days would demand vigilance, careful thought, and strategic patience. The secrets were out, the lies exposed, but the full repercussions were yet to play out. And in that quiet, she understood one undeniable truth. Control had shifted irreversibly, and she now stood at the center of a web that would determine the fates of all involved. The weight of understanding settled over her like a cloak, knowledge, power, and danger intertwined in a way that left no room for retreat. Raphael finally spoke, voice trembling, a mixture of regret and fear. "Isabella, I never meant for any of this to happen. His words faltered under the weight of her gaze. She did not respond immediately, allowing silence to stretch, a subtle tool of psychological leverage. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The man who had once commanded her trust now trembled beneath the scrutiny she wielded with precision. Sophia attempted to speak next, her tone shaky, defensive. "You don't understand. It wasn't—" Isabella raised her hand, a gesture that ended her protests before they began. "I understand perfectly," she said, voice steady, low, and controlled. Every lie, every betrayal, everything you thought was hidden. It's all unraveling now, and there is nowhere left to run. Her words cut through the room like a knife, precise and measured, leaving no room for denial. The villa felt smaller, charged with the weight of truth. Every shadow, every corner, seemed to bear witness to the collapse of carefully constructed lives. Isabella noted the subtle tremors in Raphael's hands, the avoidance in Sophia's eyes, and she felt an intoxicating mix of satisfaction and anticipation. The secrets she had uncovered were no longer abstract. They were living, breathing proof of deceit and manipulation, impossible to ignore or dismiss. By midday, she began to catalog everything systematically, organizing the evidence she had accumulated into coherent files and timelines. Each document, each photograph, each message was a thread in the tapestry she had patiently unraveled. The act of organization was both practical and cathartic. It allowed her mind to focus, to maintain control in a situation where emotions could easily spiral beyond containment. As the hours passed, Isabella realized the magnitude of what had occurred. The confrontation, the exposure, the psychological pressure she had applied. It had all been a precursor to a reckoning that would extend far beyond this villa. Raphael and Sophia were left with no illusions, no defenses. Their lives, meticulously constructed on deception, were now laid bare. The realization brought a cold, precise clarity. The unraveling of secrets was not an end, but the beginning of consequences they could neither predict nor contain. By evening, the villa was suffused with quiet, a tense calm settling over the three of them. Isabella knew that the coming days would demand vigilance, careful thought, and strategic patience. The secrets were out, the lies exposed, but the full repercussions were yet to play out. And in that quiet, she understood one undeniable truth. Control had shifted irreversibly, and she now stood at the center of a web that would determine the fates of all involved. The villa was quiet, almost eerily so, the aftermath of exposure settling like dust over the rooms. Isabella sat alone on the edge of the sofa, her mind a whirlpool of calculation, emotion, and anticipation. The confrontation had been executed flawlessly, the secrets laid bare, and the consequences of deception now tangible. Yet in the silence, a deeper question gnawed at her. What would come next? Justice? Revenge? Or a line that blurred between the two, impossible to distinguish in the heat of betrayal? Raphael remained seated in the corner, silent and subdued, the charm and confidence that had defined him reduced to a fragile mask of guilt. He avoided Isabella's gaze, yet his presence was an unspoken acknowledgment of defeat. Sophia, too, lingered uneasily, her posture defensive, eyes darting to the evidence scattered across the table. Isabella observed them both with measured precision, cataloging every reaction, every twitch, every subtle tremor. The power dynamics had shifted irreversibly, and she understood, with chilling clarity, that the next steps would define the boundaries between justice and personal vengeance. Her thoughts circled back to the evidence she had gathered, the photographs, the messages, the timelines meticulously constructed over days of observation and research. Each piece was a weapon, a tool of exposure, yet also a potential trap. Isabella realized that wielding them recklessly could tip her hand, invite scrutiny, or even legal consequences. She had uncovered the truth, and now the responsibility for what would follow rested squarely on her shoulders. She rose from the sofa and paced, feeling the weight of the villa's silent walls pressing in, as though they bore witness to the moral and emotional crossroad she now faced. Justice demanded careful, deliberate action, evidence, and procedure. Revenge, by contrast, promised immediacy and personal satisfaction, but carried with it danger, unpredictability, and moral compromise. Isabella's mind wrestled with the duality, her pulse quickening with the tension between moral imperative and the intoxicating pull of retribution. Raphael finally spoke, voice small, tentative. Isabella, I know I've done wrong. I can't undo it, but maybe we can find a way to... He trailed off under the weight of her gaze. She did not respond immediately. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive, forcing him to confront the full gravity of his actions. Every word, every gesture, every glance from him now carried the unmistakable imprint of accountability. Sophia, too, attempted to speak, her tone trembling. Please, you don't have to do this. There's still time. Isabella raised a hand, a subtle gesture that silenced them both. The room seemed suspended, the air taut with anticipation as she considered the final move. Her mind weighed every consequence, every ripple of action, balancing moral clarity against the irresistible allure of personal satisfaction. After several tense moments, she spoke, voice calm but firm, each word deliberate. The truth has been revealed. Deception can no longer protect you. What happens next will determine whether justice is served or whether we fall into the darkness of revenge. She paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. I've made my choice, but you will understand its consequences fully before this is over. The room remained still, charged with anticipation. Isabella's decision was precise, calculated, and irrevocable. The confrontation had been only the beginning. Now the aftermath would unfold in measured steps, each one designed to ensure accountability, expose truth, and deliver consequences commensurate with the betrayal she had endured. The villa, once a stage for lies and deception, had become the crucible where justice, morality, and personal retribution would collide. As the first light of dawn filter edged through the curtains, illuminating the scattered evidence and the silent, apprehensive faces of Raphael and Sophia, Isabella felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The path forward was fraught, the choices irreversible, yet she understood that the line she had drawn, between justice and revenge, was hers alone to navigate. The storm of revelation had passed, but its echoes would shape the lives of all involved in ways that would resonate far beyond this villa. And in that quiet, heavy with consequence, Isabella recognized one undeniable truth. Justice, revenge, and truth were threads intertwined so tightly that separating them was impossible. The reckoning had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again.